Hello and welcome back to the Game Room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. And it seems like a lot of people these days who cover games seem to hate them. Or at least the people who play them. Well, that's not me, and that's not the 2,102 of you beautiful people checking out this video here today. Holy cow, we've got another 100 subs in like 2 weeks. This is insanity. Thank you guys so much. I'm blown away by the level of support we've had. And for today's video, I was looking back at some of my older videos and I came across one called Digital Games That I Wanted Physical Releases For. And funnily enough, there's a bunch of releases now for these games. And actually, in looking at it, there was some releases for these games at that time that I was unaware of. So, if that sounds interesting to you, let's check it out. There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life.
This is my game room.
Alright, if my voice sounds a little hoarse right now, I actually recorded this entire video with my microphone off. So I have 30 plus minutes of me doing this. And obviously, I can't make a video that way, so here we do. Take 2. I've gotten into collecting Xbox 360 games a lot lately, and in doing that, it came to my attention that some of these games that I thought were digital only actually did have physical releases on the Xbox 360. And on that list I told you about of games I wanted to come out, one of the most important ones was a game called Geometry Wars 2. And so this Xbox Live Arcade game pack has Geometry Wars 2 Evolved on it. And I absolutely adore this game. It has a mode called Sequence in it, where you basically go through 25 set levels where every single time you play it, the exact same thing happens at the exact same time. You get a certain amount of lives and a certain amount of bombs, and the more points you garnered during this sequence, the more bombs and lives you can unlock. Now, it's very, very difficult just to get through the entire sequence, because if you lose a life in a level, the whole level ends. So you get a big X on it and you lose a life. So you can only die so many times, and especially you want to maximize your points. And it really is just an incredible game. It is just, that alone is well worth playing in my opinion for Geometry Wars 2. The main game, the different modes you can do are fun and all, but the main reason why I ever pick up Geometry Wars 2 is to play Sequence. So finding out that there was in fact an Xbox 360 release for it, which I got this for like $15, $20, and it also comes with Bomberman Live, which is a really fun version of Bomberman, and then Luminous Live. But still, the fact that finding out all these years later, like, I've thought this forever, that there was never a physical release of Geometry Wars 2. Lo and behold, there it is, right there in front of me. And it's just, I can't believe that was the case. Now, that also goes for another Xbox game, Geometry Wars. So, Xbox Live Arcade Unplugged has the first Geometry Wars, which was the whole reason why I wanted to get an Xbox 360 to begin with. I remember playing that game in college at a friend's house, getting enamored by all the different lights and just thinking, I need this game. I need to play this. I need this music in my life. This is incredible. It's like I'm playing Apple iTunes Visualizer, but in a game. And in all honesty, I still enjoy the regular Geometry Wars mode better in the first one than I do on the second one even. The first one, you'll start getting random power-ups throughout it. So you'll get a wave beam or you'll get a machine gun. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just more fun. They removed that from the second game for some reason, which I don't know why they did it, because the first game is incredible. I really enjoyed playing it. Now, I've played the sequels, didn't enjoy them that much. I really would stick to the first 2 games, and now that there's physical ways to play both of them on the Xbox 360, but still to have them in case the servers ever go down or in case my system blows up, I'm all about that and super stoked. And then lastly, when I got my Xbox 360 in 2008, I bought it off eBay. And it came with a handful of games. I know Assassin's Creed and The Club and a few other things. But when I turned on the system, this was news to me. I'd never had a system that had an internal hard drive. And there was a couple of games already preloaded into it. And one of those games was called Feeding Frenzy. And Feeding Frenzy is a game where you play as a fish who then eats smaller fish, becomes a larger fish, so that you can eat the larger fish that used to eat you, and then so on and so forth. I know it's basically a kind of like, not a remake, but a similar game to an older game that has this same mechanic. I don't know the name of it. I've seen videos on it. But at the time, my college girlfriend and I really enjoyed this game. And the fact that it just came as a bonus and it was baked in. And before that point, I had never really considered this kind of library type thing for a system, a console. That was always something that was really kind of still foreign to me. At this point, I had just came out of playing World of Warcraft for several years. But yeah, Feeding Frenzy was a lot of fun. I always in the back of my head were like, I'd love that had a physical version. Lo and behold, here it is. And now all three of those, which they're all dirt cheap. I think they're like $6, most $10-15. And there's other games on them too. But for those three, that's why I got those 3 editions of those games. Okay. Now, another game that was on that video about games I wanted to have a physical release was the first game made by this company. And at the time, I think they had only made 2 other games, and the third game was on the way, and that game is Bastion. So when limited run games came out with this, I had to jump on it. This was really, it came out, I want to say 2011, and it really had a lot of old school sensibilities built into a new school game. So it felt like I was playing something that may have came out on the Super Nintendo, but then was really taking advantage of the new capabilities. It didn't look cheap. It didn't feel cheap. It had a very interesting combat where you could have different weapons that you could augment. And then the most unique part of the whole game was the narrator. So you had a narrator that would basically change what they would say about you as you were playing. So if you had the sword out and were cutting down grass and enemies, the narrator would be like, oh, the kid is knocking them down, slashing them through like they're blades of grass. And then if you changed it up to getting the mortar or the spear, spearing the enemies, would be like, oh, he speared them good, ran them through like a boar on the... it was very much reflective of what you were doing in the game based on what you were doing with your moveset. And seeing that happen in real time in 2011 was so unique and cool that there wasn't ever anything like it up to that point. And it really made an arcade game look like, oh, this could be more than just a single screen Geometry Wars type game or a simple little Feeding Frenzy. Like, this is a real full-blown AAA feeling experience. And at least for myself, it put indie developers on the map and really made me start taking risks on other games because of Bastion. And then Supergiant Games alone has become one of my favorite publishers. But the fact that Bastion got a physical release years later, I want to say this came out in 2011 and the physical release didn't come out until 2016, 17, and even then you ordered it and it showed up 2 years later. But yes, one that I was super stoked to finally get a physical release. It actually had to be beyond that because I think my video was 2017, so this was like 18 or 19. It took forever, but super cool to see that happen. Now, speaking of that developer, which was Supergiant Games, another game they were releasing was a game that was their 4th game. So they had, after Bastion was Transistor, which did get a physical release. I haven't gotten it. And then Pyre, which Pyre is a very interesting game. A lot of people sleep on it. No one really talks about it. And largely because it got overshadowed because they came out with their next game in early access for PCs. And then it was only going to be on, I believe, PS4 or PS5. I can't remember exactly. But that is Hades. And Hades... it's kind of a culmination of what this developer was all about because it took its excellent world building, its excellent storytelling, and melded it with a very, I would say, modernish take on a gameplay formula, which was the roguelike. So they took things that had been developed in Rogue Legacy and Spelunky and Dead Cells, and then they molded their Supergiant Games aesthetics into it and came up with Hades, a game where you're playing as the son of the god of the underworld, Hades, a guy named Zagreus, who's trying to escape out of the underworld to be with his mother, Penelope. And I'm a big fan of Greek mythology, so this game was right up my wheelhouse. And every time you die in the underworld, you go all the way back down. So as far as roguelikes go, this game was perfect because it actually made sense. It's not like a game where you would just die and then your heir would take over, or you would die and then be reborn and the thing would shift. No, you actually are an immortal being. You just are temporarily dying and then being resurrected back downstairs at home, and then you have to go back at it. And it's so cool. I mean, the only gripe I had with it was the fact that of the gods, Apollo was strangely missing. I mean, they put in Dionysus and Demeter, but you don't have Apollo, which luckily the sequel's coming out is rectifying, which that's a first for the developer. They've never done a sequel as far as I've known for any of their games. But yeah, just Hades, excellent game. One that I did double dip on it, so I did not actually open up my physical copy. I just downloaded it for the Switch, and I want to say that was my game of the year it came out in 2020. Phenomenal game. Very much looking forward to the sequel. All right, so now a game that did come out that was on the Xbox One. So at the time, I was a little hesitant because once limited run games came out and I started seeing, oh, big popular games would get releases. Okay, let's hold off on buying it digitally. Let's wait until a physical release comes out so I'm not having to double dip. Though sometimes you would wait and then the game would come out physically anyways. And in this instance, it did. And that was Ori and the Blind Forest. Now, Ori and the Blind Forest is a perfect snapshot Metroidvania game. In fact, it's about a 6-hour experience. It's got gorgeous visuals. It's got amazing gameplay. And it's a very unique setting where you do not actively attack anything. You have a little sprite that will attack on your behalf. You mainly have to be around the enemies and using your various different dodge abilities and getting out of the way until the other thing takes it out. And I really, really enjoyed this gameplay loop. I found the whole game was just really incredible. Very short and sweet. Now, Will-O-the-Wisp came out and kind of changed the formula for the worse, in my opinion. But Ori and the Blind Forest, the first game, you could almost just stop it after this game. It's very good. It's kind of peak indie game of that era type thing, before it started getting influenced by the other games. And the one that I'm saying it got influenced by the most, for better or worse, was a game called Hollow Knight. So Hollow Knight is a fun Metroidvania, don't get me wrong. I do find it to be severely overrated. In my opinion, a lot of people glom onto Hollow Knight because it was their first experience with such an in-depth Metroidvania, much like us kids who had Super Metroid or Symphony of the Night would. Well, that for a lot of people is Hollow Knight, because it takes some semblance of mechanics like Dark Souls, as far as you can die and then you can go back to your corpse and get your stuff back, as well as there is a risk reward where the more you attack, the more ability essence you build up, and then you can heal yourself with it. So that's another Bloodborne type mechanic. I find it a little bit too cryptic, a little bit too samey. Certain things like they don't mark your character on the map. You have to use one of your augments to do that. And then there's so many different augments you can do that it just gets to the point of overwhelm. Like, I don't mind having a loadout and then being forced to figure out the game based on that loadout. But then if you have a loadout that you can customize 30 different times, and it just makes the game less fun for me. In all honesty, less fun for me. I want a game that was tailored to the experience that everyone's going to have, instead of, oh, well, this person who did the double jump versus this person who did this. Anyways, I still like the game, and also I was very glad it got a physical release. So if you notice, I had the Indie Box release. Indie Box was a company that was around for a little bit there, a little bit before Limited Run, and they were releasing PC-only games, still on the PC. So that's probably what did them in. Had they made an option to not just do PC games and maybe done console games, maybe they would have lasted a little longer. But it was also a monthly service where they just randomly selected a game. But towards the end there, they got some bangers, and they got Hollow Knight, and I was just glad to get a physical release of it. And I enjoyed playing it. I thought it was good. You know, is Silk Song ever going to come out? But still, one that I was glad to see get a physical release. Now, another one that I kind of jumped on the train late. I didn't even know this game was coming out. It was kind of a stretch goal of the original Kickstarter for a spiritual successor to Symphony of the Night. And this game is called Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. Now, before I played this, I had gotten into the original Castlevanias, so especially Castlevania 3, and this game is very much a love letter to the original Castlevania 3. No one expected this game to be all that great, and it came out and it just was an absolute banger. And when Limited Run did a physical release, I went forward and I actually got the damn special silver box edition that looks like an NES game. And I've never opened it because this is one of the ones where I did double dip. As much as I hate double dipping, it does happen from time to time. And it's just a fun game where you can go through. You have the ability to recruit characters as you go through it. There's alternate pathways through levels. There's a lot of cool set piece bosses like the gold guy. Each one of the different characters you can control have their own unique skill sets. But then there's alternate ways of playing the game. So instead of recruiting the characters, you can actually not recruit the characters and either kill them or ignore them. And then Zangetsu, the main character, gets alternate abilities and can go through the levels differently. And it's just a very, very cool experience. I went through and I played it probably 3 different times, and I love it when games give this kind of replayability, where it's not just you're playing 80% of the same game and then 20% is different. Like, no, this is a completely different way of playing the game, and was really, really cool. Now, another game that was a big indie darling when it came out, and I knew I wanted to check it out, but I just wanted to wait until it got a console release because it was on PC only. And then when they announced it was coming to console, they said there was also going to be a physical version. So I held off on it even longer, and that is the legendary Undertale. So Undertale is a very unique game, very much takes place in the vein of those type of people who like quirky RPGs, love Earthbound. This is definitely a tongue-in-cheek game where you're dealing with talking plants and talking skeletons and all this other stuff. But the game has a lot of heart. And it also has, once again, a very unique way of playing it. So you can go through and it's a turn-based RPG, but then within that turn-based RPG, if you get attacked, you'll have the ability to get a little black square where you'll have sometimes platforming sections, sometimes shooter sections, and you're avoiding damage in this way. And it's unlike anything you've seen before. And what's very cool is that you have the option to do no damage. You can win the entire game without killing a single person, and that's called the pacifist run. Or you can kill everyone and do the murderer's run, or you can do a mix of both and get a different ending. And there's several different endings. There's very good writing. It's the first game I ever platinumed on a PS4 for the trophies, just because it's impossible not to get it. For the most part, if you're exploring, you know, Toby Fox, the guy who made it, just made a very unique and wonderful world with phenomenal music and very unique gameplay. I'd like to check out his next game. I want to say it's free even, but it came in different parts. But Undertale is a very, very fun experience, one well worth playing a couple times, and it is a turn-based RPG, but it's still like a 6-7 hour experience. And then you can do the second run, and it's about the same, so it does not overstay its welcome, and is just a very, very fun game, and one that I was super glad to see it get a physical release. Now, speaking of that, around that time frame, another game came out that was much like Undertale kind of struck that Earthbound fan base's niche. There was the Harvest Moon niche, and then a game came out called Stardew Valley. So this was another one made by one person. Just came out of left field. It was on PC. Didn't really know much about it. But then it was everywhere. Everyone on Twitch was playing it. Every YouTuber was talking about it or playing it. And as someone who loves the N64 Harvest Moon, but then as the Harvest Moons kind of kept going, I feel like they started to lose their way. This game really brought it back to basics. But then it also introduced its own flavor. So you go through and you have the daily routine of managing your farm, managing your animals, going in, collecting resources, wooing the townsfolk, taking part in the festivals. But then there's also not a line of darkness, but a line of reality that we're always missing from the other Harvest Moon games that this game does implement. I mean, you have people that are in abusive relationships or who are dealing with alcoholism, or, you know, there's even the ability for you can get married in this game and you can get divorced. So there's there's actually more consequences to regular life than there is in any other Harvest Moon game. So it's interesting to see those implemented. But then the best part they add is they add an actual active combat aspect to this game. So there is a mine system that you can go in and dungeon crawl in all the time. And instead of just digging for ore or walking around doing nothing, you're going around fighting monsters, looking for exit points to get deeper into the caves. And it's just a very... probably the thing that that Stardew Valley does the best. It still has wonderful music, great characters and everything, but adding this level of combat is what takes it from going from a solid game to a game that's gone into the stratosphere. And I was so excited to play this. I was waiting for a physical release. It did come out. I played probably 70, 80 hours the year it came out. And then when it came out on the Switch, I double dipped and I bought it digitally for that, and I probably put another 70, 80 hours into it in 2019. And it's just always fun, always cool to see, and it's just one of those things where it captures the essence of the Harvest Moon game that I'm familiar with, Harvest Moon 64, so much better than any of the other Harvest Moon games I've ever played. And well done. Well done to, I think, Chucklefish, the one who did that. But yeah, excellent game. All right, so speaking of an excellent game that had a version I was not aware of that was actually physical, was Fire Emblem Fates Special Edition. So when this game came out, much like Nintendo does with Pokemon, they came out with two versions. So you had Fire Emblem Birthright and Fire Emblem Conquest. Each one of the games were effectively the same game told from the other side. Now, the first 6 chapters of both are the same. So you find out that you are actually an adopted child that was stolen from another kingdom. And then in chapter 6, you have a decision to make where you either stay with your adopted family or you go back to your birth family. And it's very interesting, and just, you know, it leads to a lot of unique scenarios. Well, there's actually a third version called Fire Emblem Fates Revelations, where you decide to go with neither. Now, that one is DLC only, and if I recall, it wasn't even available at launch. So when the game came out, there was no way to get that version of the game unless you had the special edition. And the special edition, I didn't even know was a thing. And thank God I went out and tracked it down before. I think I got it for $100 back in 2017-ish, sometime around there. I found it on Craigslist of all things. And now the special edition, because it's the only way to play to guarantee you have the third version of Fire Emblem Fates on disc. It never came out. It was never released. It was never included in anything else. And now that special edition is probably one of the most expensive things in my collection. It's like $400, $500. Something insane. And the Revelations pathway is actually pretty interesting. I mean, all three, they got, you know, it's definitely not the strongest Fire Emblem entry. I did enjoy it. You know, Awakening's probably better, but you know, it's one of those things where I'm glad when they did 3 houses, they just made it all in one game instead of with this one where pretty much you had to buy the special edition to get all 3 different playthroughs. But yeah. Fun thing there. Glad to have it. Another one, much like Geometry Wars 2 and 1, I didn't know there was a on-disc version until after the game had been out for a few years. So I definitely jumped on that one. Alright, so this next game was a game that was a digital-only release for the PS3, and it was one of the first times where I really felt like I was missing out not having a PS3. And then when I found out it came out physically, it was one of the ones that got put on the top of the list of games I needed when I finally got my PS3 at the end of 2012. And that game, surprisingly so, is Journey. Now you have to realize when Journey came out, its level of zen, its kind of lack of gameplay in an immersive world where you literally are just walking and trying to get to the end. You don't know what the story is. It's very much captivating storytelling from where you're at. It's relaxing. You can't even partner up with somebody unless they randomly join your game. You don't know who they are. You can't talk to each other, and you just go through this journey together. It was just something so novel and unheard of that it really made me want to play it. Now, 2024, yeah, we have these games in droves. They're everywhere. As well as the type of experience isn't that unique. But back then in 2012, 2013, it really was a unique experience and just a drop-dead gorgeous game as well. The way the physics worked on the sand, the lighting effects, because there wasn't much to it, the developers could really focus in on making it visually impressive. And as well as the physical release had Flower on it and Flow, which Flower was another game I had heard of that was just much kind of an experience. But that's kind of the when I played Journey, I really enjoyed my playthrough with it. It lived up to the hype, and it's still one of those games where I'd like to have Jen experience it, see what it's like. I know it's a little overblown now, but at the time, I can't emphasize this enough, that when it came out, it very much was something incredibly unique and unlike anything we'd ever seen before. And something that I still can't tell you I've seen anything equal the kind of just mystery and lack of stress, while at the same time being worth playing, that Journey gave me. All right, now back to the incredibly hard platforming games that didn't get a physical release. And this was one that came out, I want to say, in 2009. And it was on that indie movie, the movie thing. It was one of those games that was showcased, and I wasn't even aware of this game. So after I saw that movie, I was like, wait a minute, this game's available to download and play. I need to jump on this. And that was Super Meat Boy. So Super Meat Boy is incredibly fun. Another indie box release. This was the only way you could play Meat Boy physically for the longest time. I think they've done Switch versions now and PS4. Like, it's on everything now, but for a time, there was no way to get this physically other than the indie box. And Super Meat Boy is just really one of those run your head against the wall games, but it's in such short snippets that it doesn't overstay its welcome. And then one of the nice things the game does is that after you finally do beat a level, it'll show you all of your runs simultaneously. So if you took 50 times to beat a level, once you beat it, then you get the incredibly fun viewing pleasure of seeing 50 different Meat Boys run, and then all 49 of them dying until the one Meat Boy who makes it gets to the end. So that's one of those things where even if you're dying constantly and you can't get to the end, you can't beat the level, there's always that thing in the back of your head that's like, man, this is frustrating, but when we get there, we're going to have one hell of a movie to watch, and you can even save the movies too, because they know. So that alone was brilliant game design. I haven't played Meat Boy Forever or any of the kind of the expansions since then. I'm still waiting for the damn Mugenics game to come out, but I believe Team Meat kind of split up. One of the guys, I think Ed McMillan, and then I can't remember the other guy's name, but he went to do Binding of Isaac, and they went their own ways, but still, Super Meat Boy, phenomenal game, one that I was super glad to get physically. It's one of the things that kept me from canceling Indie Box. Right there at the end of Indie Box, they had like banger after banger. They did Hollow Knight, Banner Saga, Meat Boy, Torchlight 2. So one of the reasons why I hung on there till the end, and then they just disappeared. All right, another one that Indie Box did, but this game actually did get a physical release. It was another game made by one person, and originally I pre-ordered this for the Wii U until luckily they said we're switching it to the Switch, and I was glad for that. And that is Axiom Verge, and this is the Multiverse Edition. Now, there actually is another physical release of Axiom Verge 1. I think Limited Run did it or something. But I don't know. But yes, Axiom Verge, the true successor to Super Metroid, very much takes place in that vein. Interesting and sometimes excellent music, sometimes okay music. Lots of different weapons you can pick up, lots of different abilities. The kind of the glitch in the Matrix type thing that you solve. Very enjoyable. It's funny, when I played Axiom Verge 2, it really did not seem at all like the first game. Like when I remember playing the first game, I really enjoyed it. And then the second one, I still had fun, but it didn't hold the candles to the first one in my opinion. But all in all, phenomenal game. One of those ones where I tracked down the damn indie box because I didn't think this was ever getting a physical release. And then as soon as I got the indie box, then they announced physical release, which I'm never going to hate on. The more physical releases I can get, the better. Now, this was a game that I was hyped for, but I hadn't actually played it. I went purely based on what I heard about the game. So I was going to wait for a limited run release of it because you know it was coming and they wanted to hold off on it. They delayed this release because they wanted to put everything on disc. And then after the game came out, I think they came out with more DLC. So it's not even everything on disc, but that game is Celeste. Now, Celeste, in my opinion, is a fun game. It very much is in that Meat Boy vein, but it is not nearly as good, and it gets way too much hype, in my opinion. The music is not all that great. The storyline is way overblown. It's very heavy-handed in the fact that they're really trying to make this emotional storyline of a girl dealing with her own inner demons, and climbing the mountain is symbolic for her beating her own mountain inside, and all this, this really nice stuff, don't get me wrong, but not necessarily something that I'm I care about when I'm playing the game. I want to play the game. You know, give me Meat Boy, give me stupid pots of meat that get destroyed. I don't want this really introspective thing that's going to make me have to stop and think about how I'm climbing the mountain while I'm also climbing the mountain inside. But that's kind of how Celeste plays out. Still a very fun game, very interesting platforming, but one of those ones where I think it was vastly overblown for what it was because of what it was and the kind of messaging it had. And so, you know, the gameplay's fun. The gameplay's fun, but it was not nearly as enjoyable as I thought it would be. So this is something that I did not ever expect to get a physical release. Now, this technically is not a physical release, but it's the closest we're ever going to get to one. And that is Star Fox 2 on the SNES. Nintendo actually released a canceled game. How cool is that? The SNES Mini, the big selling factor was the fact that you could actually have a version of Star Fox 2 that was complete and ready for the West, that was not done through a homebrew or a ROM hack or anything like that. Now, Star Fox 2 I have played, and I will say I don't enjoy it all that much. The kind of the tower defenseness, going to different levels, and then having to deal with the different levels that have you playing in the walker, and you know, things that luckily when Star Fox 64 came out, you had the tank, but it didn't really annoy me as much as when I played Star Fox Assault and Star Fox Zero. And a lot of that DNA can be found in Star Fox 2, ironically. So, not the greatest game, not one I really enjoyed playing at all, but one that I definitely am glad that it came out, because it's just one of those Nintendo oddities that it's so cool to see not only get released, but get a physical version that I'm not just downloading, because this not going anywhere. So that's what we got for this week, guys. There are a bunch of games that I wanted physical releases of, and hey, they got them. And if there's more physical release games that you guys are interested in, let me know. We're going to do a part 2 of this. I have a bunch more games I can talk about. Some of the ones that I don't actually have physical copies of. You know, one of them I'm still waiting for. Baldur's Gate 3, where the hell are you? It's supposed to come out in the spring of 2024. Spring's almost over, guys. Come on, Larian. Anyways, that's what you get for this week. Let me know what you thought of the video. Thank you guys again. Thank you all for liking, subscribing, checking out the video. Thank you for commenting. Once again, I have channel memberships now, which are cool. We'll try and figure out some cool perks for those. I have a Patreon. Thank you to all the Patreon members who support us. They definitely we're about halfway to the goal of being able to buy a new computer, which I am so excited for, because I hate having to work on my damn laptop. I miss having a computer, guys. But we'll get there. And you know, with the monetization, the channel's monetized. I made $5 this month. That's more than I've ever made from YouTube, which was nothing. So hey, we're getting there. We're getting there, guys. But hey, at the end of the day, I'm just happy to be able to have this time and have you guys watch this. And thank you for letting me be a small part of your day. All right. It's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.